All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. And so for today's workshop, it shouldn't be very long, probably 30 minutes or less, so we'll have plenty of time at the end for any questions you may have. And so the purpose of today's workshop is really just to introduce everyone to Scopus, which is sort of our newest database. It's sort of a major acquisition for us. It's a very large and comprehensive database, so we think it's going to be relevant to most, if not all, of our faculty and students. And so we really want to promote it and make sure everyone understands how to use it and all the various features inside of it, because it has it's really jam-packed with a lot of different features, a lot of different metrics. And so we think a lot of people will get value out of it. And so today we're going to sort of do an overview of Scopus. What is it? What kind of coverage does it have? What are its features? But then most of today will be spent doing sort of a live demo of Scopus and showing you how to actually navigate it and use it. And so that will include its search capabilities. How do you find articles? Then we'll spend some time looking at the article metrics in Scopus. What can you find out about publishing in articles from within the platform? We'll talk about using citation chasing in Scopus, which is a term you may be familiar with if you worked on comprehensive reviews like systematic or scoping reviews. But Scopus makes it really easy to see documents that are citing a particular article or that are cited by a particular article. So spend some time looking at that. And then we'll sort of go over all the various other types of metrics that are available in Scopus. And that includes author metrics, things like H indexes, how do you analyze your own output or the output of colleagues, stuff like that. Then we'll take a look at the institution level metrics that Scopus has. And finally, we spent some time looking at the various journal metrics. One of Scopus's strengths really is in its journal metrics, and we think they'll be helpful for a lot of you who often have questions about, how do I know the prestige of a journal? How do I know its impact factor? What journals should I be looking at, in my particular field? And Scopus can help you answer a lot of those types of questions. And so, first of all, what is Scopus? So Scopus is a large, comprehensive, interdisciplinary database for primarily journal articles, but also a lot of grade literature. And so, to give you an idea of its scope, it has over 87 million citations, which span across 27,000 active titles, 23,000 of which are peer-reviewed journals. But Scopus goes beyond just journals. And so, the other 4,000 or so includes trade magazines, books and book series, conference papers, preprints, and some other things. There's notes, letters, reports, and some other miscellaneous document types that have some representation in Scopus as well. Scopus is a index database, so like PubMed, Web of Science, these kinds of major indexes. All the journals that are included in Scopus are evaluated for their editorial policies, their peer review policies, the quality of their articles, are they meeting established publishing standards, and things like that. And so similar to how, being included in PubMed is a pretty good indicator of a journal's quality. Similarly, if a journal is included in Scopus, you can usually trust that it's sort of a legitimate journal that's been around for a while. And so if you take a look here at Scopus's subject area, you can see that it has a pretty good coverage in the health sciences, at 7,500 journals. But, one of Scopus's strengths is in its coverage of other disciplines, particularly the social sciences. And part of why we really wanted to get this database for you all is that we know a lot of interdisciplinary research goes on at this university. There's a lot of topics, for example, around medical education, social determinants of health, that sort of overlap with the social sciences. And we think for those topics in particular, that coverage is going to be very valuable. Similarly, also has pretty decent coverage in the life sciences. And so sort of those of you that may be doing research in biochemistry, the basic sciences, that coverage will be helpful for you as well. Particularly because these are areas that, PubMed, for example, typically leaves out because PubMed focuses more sort of on the core of medicine. In addition to those, Scopus also has a good amount of coverage for the physical sciences and the humanities, which don't come up, as often at our institution. But if you are doing work in any of those areas, in particular, I'm thinking, medical humanities, for example, narrative medicine, that type of thing, Scopus can also be helpful for that kind of research. Now, one thing I really did, want to note here is that Scopus has sort of a wider view of the health sciences than some other databases. PubMed, as many of you may know, tends to focus on medicine in the sort of MD-DO sense of the word. Scopus's interpretation of health sciences is broader than that, and so it has a much, better coverage of the allied health and health sciences disciplines. Now, it's not quite as good as our allied health specific databases like CINAHL, but it does have good coverage. And so for sort of any sort of lit review, Scopus will help you get sort of a broader view of things and include the health sciences in your searching. And the other thing that I want to mention about Scopus is, like I mentioned before, metrics are a really big part of it. Scopus has really rich metadata that enables it to, connect articles, authors, institutions, and journals all together to track how they cite each other, how they relate to each other, how our authors working together, how our institutions publishing, and in what areas are they publishing in. And so Scopus has metrics that cover sort of all of these things. And we'll be spending a lot of time today looking at these various metrics and thinking about ways that you may be able to use those to uncover interesting things about the publishing landscape or about your own publishing output, journals, that type of thing. In particular, it's worth noting that Scopus has 3 different types of journal metrics, and we'll talk about those in more detail in a little bit here. But it makes it a really good source for identifying target journals to publish in, for example. And so now we're going to hop over to Scopus, and we'll show you how exactly it all works. And so just to confirm, is everybody seeing the Scopus page for me right now? Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs up. Thank you. All right, and so if you look at the Scopus homepage, this is sort of what its basic search page looks like. And at a glance, it looks pretty familiar. You have your search bar, or then you have your search field, which will determine sort of what you're looking in. And so as an example here, I'm just going to do sort of a basic search here for, we'll say, diabetes and mental health. And one of the things I did want to note here is that if you're familiar with advanced search techniques that you may have already used in PubMed, for example, like Boolean operators, truncation, phrase searching, all of that applies to Scopus as well, and does look pretty much the same. So, for those of you who are familiar with the sort of advanced search techniques, translating a search from PubMed to Scopus is going to look pretty similar, and there's not going to be a huge learning curve there. By default, Scopus will search for title, abstract, and keywords, which is a pretty good general search. But like other databases, you also have the option to search, for authors, for journal names, for specific things like just titles. Because of Scopus's particular strengths, you can also search for things like affiliation, search for specific for resources going on at specific institutions. You can look at things like funding, sponsors, and various other helpful things. Like if you want to search for conferences, because Scopus has really good coverage of conference papers, you can do that. Like other databases, you can sort of add more search fields, build your search iteratively, connect them with Boolean operators. One important thing to note here is that Scopus uses and not instead of just not, which is what PubMed and most other databases use, but it works the exact same way. They basically just phrase it a little bit differently. If you want to as well, there is an advanced search. And the nice thing about the advanced search is that it'll tell you what all the operators are. You can add them with just a click. It'll explain to you what they do. And it'll also explain all the various field codes. And it goes into much more detail. So if you're really trying to do a very comprehensive or very targeted search, and you're trying to use a lot of these advanced search techniques, the nice thing about the nice thing about Scopus is that you can click on any of these and understand exactly what you'd be searching for using that field code. And so for those of you that are sort of power searchers, this will be very helpful for doing these really targeted, really good searches. And if you're not familiar with these sort of advanced search techniques, you have no idea what we're talking about, don't worry, that's what librarians are here for. But as an example, I'm just going to do this, basic search of diabetes and mental health that I showed you earlier. And we'll take a look at the search results screen. So at the top, you'll note here that I'm currently using the new version of Scopus's search interface. When you first load in, it's going to default you to the old version, but there's going to be a big banner at the top saying, try out our new search features. And so I'm showing this version just because sometime in the near future, this is going to become the default. So I think it'll be the more helpful version for you to learn. That being said, they do look pretty similar. The changes are mostly just in the UI and sort of how they arrange things. But one of the nice things now I like about Scopus, right here in the search screen, you can go ahead and add more search terms, add more search strings, narrow down as you go, which is really helpful for iterative searching. Like other databases, here on the left, you have all of your search filters. So, you can do publication date ranges, subject areas, document types, language, and all that kind of good stuff you're used to seeing from other databases. One of the nice things about Scopus is that because it covers so many different types of, articles, including journal articles, trade journals, all things I mentioned before, you can actually drill down and make sure you're searching for specific types of content. It also does a lot of good metadata around affiliation, funding, sponsors, open access type. So if you are interested in sort of doing research on these sort of publishing, trends going on, then there's a lot of good ways you can do those from the filters as well. And again, similar to other databases, at the top here, you'll have options to export your research results, to bring them into a citation manager. You can download your search results, save them for reference lists and stuff within Scopus if you create an account. And over here, you can also save searches and set search alerts if you want emails for specific for updates on specific searches. One of the nice things, you can show all your abstracts right in the search screen, helpful if you're sorting through things. And you can sort it by a variety of different ways. By default, it sorts by date, so you'll just be seeing articles sort of in the date they were published. But if you want to, you can also see them by cited amounts, which can be helpful if you want to see sort of, what's the most cited articles going on in a particular field, what's the most impactful. And you have a couple other things too, like authors and relevance. Always be careful with relevance because Scopus doesn't tell you how exactly they're determining that. So it's kind of a bit of a black box. So it is something to be aware of.
That I believe.
So let's see, I see a question here. Do you access Scopus on library page similar to PubMed? Oh yeah, so let me actually hop over to the library homepage and show you how to get to Scopus. So if you start on the library homepage, you'll click on this databases link under Discovery Tools. And then we've actually put Scopus over here under popular and core databases, so it's really easy to get to. You can, of course, also search for it or browse for it, by S, and it's right here. But if you just go to our databases link, they'll be right here, one click away. But to get back into Scopus, before we sort of dig into what an article actually looks like, one of the things I do want to draw your attention to is this Analyze Results button. Like I said, Scopus is really good at evaluating publishing trends, and this is sort of a good example of that, which is that for any search you might run in PubMed, you can click on this button and pull up a whole bunch of metrics about that particular search. So for example, you can see here trends in the amount of articles published each year that are falling under the search in sort of our research topic. You can also do other things like here, if you do by source, you can see that the journal that's publishing the most articles in this topic is the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. And so say if you were doing research yourself in diabetes and mental health, that might tell you that this is like a journal that is interested in this kind of work and does a lot of good work in that area. Similarly, you can sort by author if you want to see sort of, who are the influential authors in this field, what institutions are publishing a lot about this. Here you can see that Harvard Medical School is actually publishing the most on this topic. And so maybe there's colleagues there that might be relevant. Funding sponsors another helpful one. You can see that if you were looking for funding in this area, the NIH, of course, is doing a lot, but also it's listing a lot of specific, centers within the NIH that you might want to look into as well. So we're going to go back to our results. And now we're going to go in and click into one of these articles, and I'll show you what an actual article page looks like in Scopus. And we're going to choose one of the highly sorted articles, so we can sort of dig into those metrics and see what that looks like. Yes, and Laura's making a good point, is that knowing sort of what journals are doing work in a particular area can be very helpful for systematic and scoping reviews if you're just in hand searching journals for that. But once you click into an article, you can see that it sort of looks like a lot of other databases. You'll have sort of all your core citation information, title, publication info here, author info here, and down here you'll have your full text access options. So for most articles will have this button to view PDF that will take you straight to the PDF of the article. And under full text options, there's often a link that will take you to a publisher page as well, if you do want to see it like on the journal website. And as long as you've accessed Scopus through the library's link, this should give you authenticated links and take you to full text that you can access without issue. You also see here up at the top, they have a number of article metrics. By default, it'll show you the number of citations that it has in Scopus and tell you sort of what percentile it's in. So this article, for example, is in the 99th percentile of articles cited in Scopus. It'll also give you its field-weighted citation impact. And that metric basically is for individual articles, and sort of like what it sounds like, it weights the citations that an article retrieves based on the field that it's in and how many citations an article in that field typically receives. And so with this particular metrics, 1.0 means that it's sort of at the exact average for an article in the field. And so at 55, you can see that this is really sort of skyrocketed and taken off even for its field. You also get to count the number of views that has gone in Scopus as well. Scrolling down, you'll get sort of all the typical information you expect, abstract, indexing information. But down here with the metrics, there's a lot more than just the ones that were up top. Here you can see the views count sort of broken down by year, and it also has PlumX metrics, which are a type of alt metrics. And so if you're not familiar, alt metrics are basically a way of measuring your research's impact beyond its citations. So in this case, it captures how many times has this article been read, how many times has it been linked to, how many times has it mentioned in the news, how often is it cited in policy documents, how often is it tweeted about. And so this gives you sort of a much fuller picture of the impact of this article beyond just its citations. And so you can see this particular article is having a lot of influence in public policy and also getting a lot of mention sort of in academic Twitter. There's also information on funding available for articles that are funded anyways. There'll usually be information, so you can sort of see who's funding what type of research. Now, one of the really nice things about Scopus is I mentioned citation chasing earlier, and that's when you take, for comprehensive searching, it's when you take an article that you know is really relevant to your research topic and look through all of the references of the article to find additional relevant research, or if you look at the articles that are citing that particular article in question, sort of going backwards and forward through the citation chains to identify other relevant research. Scopus makes this really easy. So if you scroll down here to references and click on this button here, view in search results format, this is going to pull up a list of all of the references of that article. And so the nice thing about this is because it's in Scopus, for any article that's within Scopus, you can just click on the title and go straight to the full text as well. And in cases where the text isn't available in Scopus, you'll still get some citation info that you can use to put in an ILL request to look for it elsewhere. Similarly, if you go back to the article page, up at the top, there is this box that says cited by. If you click on this link down here that says view all, it'll do a very similar thing. But this time, this list is all the articles that are citing the article we were just at. So sort of going forward in time, who is using this article. And you can see here that's even being citing by things as recent as in 2023. And just like with other lists, you can sort of scroll through them, you can sort them, and you can click on them to get to the full text. Oops, clicked on the wrong thing there. And so the last thing of interest on the article page is going to be this related documents. And basically, similar citation chasing to still help you identify other related articles, but this does it by matching authors. So you know what other articles have been produced by the authors of this article or by keywords. So sort of what's going on in that topic area. When citation chasing can give you abstracts on those lists, you should be able to because it's part of the search features. Yeah, so right up here, there's still the same button that says show all abstracts. Now, for some of these where the articles are really old, you might not get all the abstracts. In particular, like this article that we've been looking at is from 2007, and it's citing some old stuff from like the 90s and early 2000s. And so I think there's some articles that are on Scopus, and they may not necessarily have abstracts. But for anything within Scopus, yes, you'll be able to view the abstracts. And so the next thing I wanted to do was kind of show you the author metrics that are available in Scopus. And so you'll see here, if you're in an article, all of the authors listed are links. And so we're just going to go to one of these sort of at random to show you what it looks like. But if you click on an author or if you search for an author on the home screen, you'll be taken to their author profile. And this will give you all sort of the core information that Scopus has about them. You know, what institution are they affiliated with? What things have they published? If they have an ORCID and the author has opted to include their ORCID, you'll get their ORCID ID as well. But the nice thing is that Scopus will pull together an author's, citation info and tie that and give you a dashboard to look at either a colleague's or particularly your own research impact. So you can see here, it's giving you a number of citations, it's giving a number of co-authors they work with, and of course, it's giving an H-index calculated already for you, which can be very helpful. The SC number, so that's the Scopus author identifier. Basically, Scopus has its own internal system, similar to an ORCID, but it helps Scopus identify authors separate from each other, even if they don't necessarily have an ORCID attached. But if you sort of scroll down on an author page, you can see all the various information it has about it. By default, it'll show you sort of their document trends. The line is how many citations they've gotten over time. The bar graph is how many documents they produced. Note that it's going to look like there's a steep drop off here, but that's not really true. The reason it looks like that is showing the number of citations for 2023, but it's been less than a month, and so the number really isn't where it should be yet because it's comparing to the whole year 2022, for example. So it is just one thing to note about Scope is that sometimes this graphs will look kind of funky because they're always going to have to sort of the steep drop off at the most recent year. And if you click on Analyze Author Output, we can actually see a lot of this in more detail. And it'll help you see sort of some other interesting metrics. Like, for example, you can see how often are they publishing in particular journals and what journals are they publishing most often. You can see how their H-index has trended over time. As you can see, for example, a full list of all the co-authors they work with and how many times they worked with them. So this can all be really interesting information if you're just sort of like bibliometrics type stuff, or if you're interested in just seeing sort of your own trends over time. And then down here, you'll get a list of all of the things that all of their publications that are in Scopus. We get a full list of all the documents that have cited this author. And a couple other nice things about Scopus is, like I said, it includes preprints. And so you can see here all the preprints that this particular author has since 2017. And just if you're curious, the preprint service that Scopus covers is, I believe, medRxiv, bioRxiv, chemRxiv, arXiv, SSRN, and Research Square. And so it's going to cover, medicine, a lot of the basic sciences, the social sciences, and then the Research Square is kind of broad and interdisciplinary, but that's quite a lot of health sciences within it as well. Other metrics that you can see on the author page include, co-authors they've worked with. We just saw that. You see kind of what topics they're publishing in and how often, and what's their sort of most fertile research areas. And this is still sort of in beta, so you won't see it for everyone, but it can also pull in grant information. So what a good use case for this, by example, be, so you've identified a research field you're interested, you've identified sort of what the authors who are publishing the most in that field are, who the most impact authors are. Well, you can go and take a look and see, where are they getting their funding from? And that might give you ideas as to how you might acquire funding in that field, for example. So another metric I want to make sure we spend a little bit of time on is its affiliations metrics. So if you go back to the search screen, here you have an author search, but also an affiliation search. So we're going to go ahead and put in ATSU, pull that up. And the nice thing about Scopus is that for every article in Scopus, it not only ties that to its authors, but also ties those authors to the institutions they work at. And so one of the neat things about Scopus you don't get from a lot of other databases, you can actually sort of see publishing trends by particular institutions. So here, for example, you can see that, unsurprisingly, by topic, we mostly publish here in medicine, but our second highest is in social sciences. And like I mentioned earlier, part of why I wanted to get Scopus is because we do a lot of sort of social science and social science adjacent work here at the institution, and that is certainly being reflected in our metrics here. Other helpful things you can see are what other institutions are we working with. First things to note is that all the top ones are particular colleges within ATSUs. You can also drill down if you want to see college-specific information, but also down here you'll see a lot of universities that we often co-publish with. Lastly, you can see documents by source, which will tell you sort of what journals are authors publishing most often. Not very surprisingly, the Journal of the American Osteopathic Association is the journal most often cited by ATSU researchers. Now, all of these numbers you're seeing too are clickable, and they will take you to the list of these documents within Scopus, so you can sort of see their abstracts, view their citation info, and get to their full text. For example, if you wanted to see a list of all the articles produced by ATSU that are within Scopus, you can do that, and you can see that it's already pulled in some articles from early this year. Similarly, you can pull up a list of the authors that are affiliated with ATSU within Scopus. And there's various ways you can sort them, or you can sort in stuff like this by their H-index, by their document count. But at a glance here, you can see that it sorts by default by document count. And we see here that actually Dr. McLeod is our author at ATSU, sort of with the most publications under her belt. And so there's a lot of really interesting institution level information here. In particular, I think some of our centers here, like sponsored programs, the ATSU Research Institute, might be able to find some value in digging into this kind of information. And so the last thing I wanted to make sure we cover today was Scopus's journal metrics. But before that, I want to very quickly hop back over to the slides and explain the various journal metrics that are within Scopus. So like I mentioned before, Scopus uses 3 different types of journal metrics within this database, which is really helpful because all of these journal metrics calculate their numbers in sort of slightly different ways. They value things in different ways. And seeing these compared against each other can kind of give you an idea of the way these metrics differ, and the way that sort of value for a journal is going to be a little bit subjective. It's going to depend on sort of how you're defining that. But to go over them, site score is sort of the primary journal metric used by Scopus. This is the one that's sort of proprietary to the Scopus database. And basically, site score works by taking a ratio of citations to an article, to articles in a particular journal, and it divides that by the number of articles that journal has sort of produced over the past 4 years. And then it separates those out by discipline, so that you're being measured against publishing trends in a specific discipline and not overall. And there's a lot more detailed information you get in Scopus, like the exact math and algorithms, and we'll show you a little bit of that in a little bit. But basically, site score is very, at the end of the day, straightforward one. That's kind of just a ratio of articles published to the number of citations you're receiving. Now, SNP, which is source normalized impact factor, is another one. And this one basically weighs citations based on the total number of citations in a given field. Similar to site score, basically what it's trying to do is make sure that articles and journals are only being measured up against other journals in their field, because different fields have very different citation rates. SNP uses a bit more complicated of algorithms that are a bit more obtuse. If you want more information on that, it is out there. But it's going to look very similar to site score most of the time. Now, SJR is a sort of a weirder metric, and it's the one that's going to deviate most often from the other two. And the reason is that SJR weights citations that a journal receives by the prestige of the cited journal, which sort of estimates given the journal's own SJR score. So in a way, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. SJR uses its own rankings to sort the rankings of other journals. But in essence, the way SJR works is actually very similar to Google, or the way that Google used to work anyways, which is that Google assumes that the more websites that are linking to a given website is an indicator of quality, right? Because that means that other people trust the website, they're recommending it, that type of thing. Similarly, SJR assumes that the more people are citing a journal, the more important that journal is. And consequently, when articles in that journal cite article are citing an article, it's assumed that they have sort of more value coming from that citation than a citation from a lesser known journal. Yeah, Laura's mentioning that's not exactly great. And she's right. SJR is a very problematic metric because, like I said before, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. SJR claims that a journal has more prestige and therefore gives it a better rating, which in return gives it more prestige, which gives it a better rating. And so it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that isn't necessarily indicative of quality or changes over time very well. One of the other things to know about SJR too is that it's kind of an easier system to game for that reason. If a journal wanted to do scummy things to inflate their impact factor, it's a lot easier to do with SJR, things like self-citation and things like that. SJR also, because of the sort of value it ascribes to journals, inherently is biased against newer journals that haven't been around as long, and smaller journals, so things coming out of professional associations, new open access journals, that type of thing. Now it's worth noting that that's a little bit true of all metrics, because for obvious reasons, newer journals are going to have less citations and less renown, and so they're never going to show up as well in journal rankings and that kind of things. So as I'm showing you these journal metrics, it's definitely worth keeping in mind that they are rough approximates for the impact and value of a journal, but there's a lot more that goes into assessing that than just the number you're seeing on screen. And so if we go back to Scopus, here we go. If you click on this link at the top that says sources, that will take you to the journal list of Scopus. And this is where you'll be able to sort of see their metrics and compare journals and things like that. So for example, I'm going to pull up sports medicine as our field, and we can sort of look specifically in this field of sports medicine, how journals are doing. like with other search screen and Scopus, you have a couple of options here to sort things. For example, if you want to limit to only journals and not other things like conference proceedings, trade publications, that type of thing. You can limit it to show sort of like only the top 10% of journals if you really want to focus on sort of these high impact journals. If you want to limit yourself to open access journals, if you're interested in publishing open access and sort of want to just compare those, you can do that. And there's also options here to put in like a minimum number of citations and a number of article counts that are probably not as helpful, but is an option you have. But if you look at the search results screen, here you can see that by default, it sorts it by site score, like what I said is the primary metric used by Scopus. And so here, say at a glance, we see that the British Journal of Sports Medicine is sort of the highest performing journal within the field of sports medicine. And you can sort of scroll down and see sort of what the top 10 look like, stuff like that. One of the nice things about Scopus is its highest percentile. And basically, because journals are often indexed in more than one subject area, because a lot of topics sort of span subject areas, Scopus will always show you the highest ranking that a journal has across all their subject areas. So for example, down here, there's this article, there's a journal, the Journal of Sport and Health Science, which is the 5th ranked journal in sports medicine. But here you can see that it's actually the 3rd ranked journal in physical therapy. So if you are interested in doing sort of work or research that crosses those domains, this journal may be particularly helpful to you because it's having sort of good metrics in both areas. If you sort of scroll through to the right here, you'll get more information about sort of how Scopus arrives at these conclusions. So the total number of citations, the total number of articles produced. This is the percentage of their articles that are cited at all. And then towards the right here, you get the other metrics talked about, including the SNP and the SJR. And if you scroll down, you can actually see what I was talking about here, where sort of down here, we have some SNP values that are higher than some of the preceding ones, because again, just that the things are weighted a little bit differently, so they don't always quite match up. Similarly, SJR, you can see we're having sort of higher SJRs down here, even though they're lower in site score, because the way SJR sort of does its weighted citations. You can see information on the publishers. Now, if you click on one of these journals, you can get sort of more in-depth metrics about them. So it'll give you sort of over here all the metrics in one place. If you click on this, it'll take you to a Scopus search, just all the articles in that journal. And you can also set an alert to sort of be alerted when new articles from this journal are indexed in Scopus. Now, if you go down, you can see a bit more detailed information, so you can sort of see what the exact numbers are they're using to get at their site score. And so you can see here, this was the total number of citations 2018 to 2021 divided by the number of documents in 2018 to 2021. And that's just, the math right there in front of you. By default, the site score you're seeing is going to be its 2021 ranking, which is basically going to calculate how the citations played out through 2021 in the preceding 4 years. This is the sort of more up-to-date one that will include citations that go past the cutoff date of the 2021 site score, which was the 5th of May, and will go through, you can see here at the beginning of January. And so you can see here that according to the more recent one, actually, this has even gone to better site score. But by default, Scopus shows you sort of the older, more complete information, and sort of waits to make sure you have to show a full year's worth of data before making just final determinations. And there's a couple other things you can see here in the journal page as well. You can sort of compare it against other journals in the same fields. You can see its trends over time, et cetera, see the other fields that it's indexed in. And you can also see how many articles that Scopus has for these particular journals divided by year. And of course, if you want, you can click on these to get more information about the publishing trends and to see the abstracts and the full text and all of that. And so that pretty much covers all of the basic features of Scopus. I did want to here at the end just remind everybody that if you do have any questions about Scopus, you start using it and you run into some problems, you're not quite sure how to do something, you can always reach out to your liaison librarians. We'll be happy to help you troubleshoot issues, help you refine your search strategies, all that good stuff. I've also put a link here and I'll send out these slides with the recording as well to everyone who's registered. that has links to some tutorials and some trainings on Scopus itself that's coming from the publisher. And of course, I will be uploading this workshop to the area as well if you ever want to review this recording. And so now I just want to pause and ask if anyone has any questions while you have us. And yes, I will be sending the recording to everyone who registered. All right, well, if it looks like we don't have any more questions, I'll go ahead and end things now and let everyone get back to your days. I know everyone's busy, but I did just want to thank everyone again for coming out to the workshop. And I do hope that you find Scopus helpful to you in the future. We're really excited to have it, and we do think it'll help with a lot of the research that goes on at this university. Goodbye, everyone. Have a good day.